to our podcast for ECEC 3P54.
Before we dive in, we just want to take a moment to thank you, our listeners, for joining us as we explore one of the earliest learning theories that continues to influence our classrooms today.
We created this episode to connect the past and present of early childhood education and to reflect on how John Locke's ideas still shape the way we see children as learners. Imagine entering a school and going into a kindergarten classroom for the first time. The children are playing, painting, drawing, learning, exploring, reading, and asking endless amounts of questions. I bet you did not know over 300 years ago the idea that children learn best through experiences first came about. Welcome everyone to our podcast based on early childhood education theories. My name is Julia.
And my name is Carissa.
And today we will now be speaking to you about John Locke's environmental learning theory, which John was a part of creating one of the earliest ideas upon how he believed children learn and developed at a young age. We hope you enjoy.
In today's episode, we will be discussing everything about John's theory, why he had these opinions, who may have challenged his beliefs, and most importantly, what effects, if any, on educators who are working with young children currently in today's society. Firstly, we are going to draw attention to the history behind John Locke. He was born on August 29th in the year of 1632 in England, specifically Rington, Somerset. John then passed away on October 28, 1704, in Higher Lyver, Essex. John Locke was an English philosopher. His ideas form the foundation of modern empiricism and classical liberalism. He inspired both the European Enlightenment and the Constitution of the United States. The way that John thought, philosophically, was similar to the creators of modern science, mainly Robert Boyle and Sir Isaac Newton, along with many other people who were part of the Royal Society. While living during England's Enlightenment period, he held the belief about knowledge and a person's character being solely shaped through the experience that they go through, as children and the environments around them. Since they were born with empty minds, he spoke about encouraging educators to teach using gentle guidance, exploration, and observation, instead of punishing, which leads to how his ideas help shape the type of learning environments we still see today. One that focuses on hands-on experience, learning, creativity, curiosity, and kind teaching toward young children.
Here's a fun fact. John Locke actually wrote a book called Some Thoughts Concerning Education in the year of 1693. As a letter to a friend who asked for advice on how to raise his son. He never planned for it to become so influential, but it ended up shaping how people thought about teaching and parenting for centuries. Carissa, when you think about Locke's idea of the blank slate, do you see that in kids today?
Well, definitely. You can still see it when teachers focus so much on shaping children's behavior or teaching them everything. But now we know kids come with their own ideas too.
Exactly. That balance between guidance and independence is still something educators talk about all the time. While John Locke's blank slate or tabula rasa theory was extensive for its time, it's encountered a bit of criticism over the years. Locke believed that children are a blank slate, and that everything they come to know comes from experiences and our five senses. But many modern psychologists argue that this view is way too simple. We now know that children aren't just passive sponges soaking up what's around them, they're active participants in their own learning. For example, developmental theorists like John Piaget and Lev Vygotsky showed that children are born with ability to think, reason, and interact with others. As Mihai and Drone points out, Locke's entirely environmental approach reduces the complexity of human nature to sensory input. In other words, Locke believed that knowledge comes entirely from what we sense and experience, but this misses how children's thoughts, emotions, and problem-solving skills also help shape who they become. Another critique comes from Gregory Bynum, who compared Locke's ideas to John Dewey's later philosophy. He noticed that Locke saw children as shaped by their environment, while Dewey believed children learn through interaction with it. That might sound like a small difference, but it's actually huge. It means modern educators see children as co-creators in their learning, not just blank slates being written on. Finally, some people criticize Locke's moral and disciplinary ideas for reflecting the strict society of the 17th century in England. Locke thought adults should guide children towards rationality and virtue, which feels a bit authoritative compared to how we support children today. David Elkind explains that modern early childhood education focuses more on empathy, collaboration, and responsive caregiving rather than on control. Still, despite all these critiques, Locke's ideas were a starting point. They sparked major discussions about how experience and environment shaped learning. It's helped pave the way for how educators today balance both nature and nurture in child development.
So, what does John Locke's theory actually mean for us as early childhood educators today? Just because John Locke lived in the 17th century does not mean that his ideas do not have an influence on how we think about learning, teaching, and child development in today's society. Locke thought children's minds were blank slates and that every experience they go through as children impact their story. For educators, this idea highlights the striking power of the environment, how we speak to the children, the materials we give them, and most importantly, the relationships we build. These all impact how children learn and develop. In recent early learning, this corresponds to what we call learning by doing, giving children the chance to explore, question, and learn from hands-on experiences. When kids do art, build with blocks, or observe nature outside, they are participating in exactly what Locke described, learning through their senses and reflection. David Elkind explains that modern early childhood education is based on the idea that young children learn best through active, hands-on experiences in an environment that fosters curiosity, social interaction, and emotional well-being. This displays Locke's values, in which is that understanding develops through experience, but in a much more child-centered way. Locke also highlights the significance of moral education and beneficial relationships. He thought that children grasp concepts the best through calm teaching and gentle correction, rather than punishment. This connects strongly to today's beneficial guidance and self-management practices, where teachers practice and incorporate kindness, empathy, and problem-solving instead of control. You will notice John's impact throughout documents such as the kindergarten program and How Does Learning Happen, which inspire educators to design their environments for the children to make sure that they support the developmental needs of belonging, engagement, expression, and well-being. When teachers construct classrooms filled with sensory objects such as natural light, open-ended play, and loving relationships, they are putting Locke's concepts into their own practice, which is concentrating on learning through experience. Gregory Bynum, as well, reminds us that while Locke brought into focus on how the classroom forms the child, today, educators assess the idea of portraying young children as co-creators of their own development. That means our role isn't just to provide experiences, it's to listen, observe, and join in children's discoveries. Finally, Locke's idea that the character is shaped by early experiences challenge educators to think about the long-term impact of how we teach. Every interaction, every encouragement, every opportunity to explore helps form who a child becomes as a whole. So, while his theory might seem old, it reminds us of a lasting truth that education is about nurturing both the mind and the heart. Okay, so we also want to leave you with just one final thought. How might Locke's belief and experience influence your own teaching.
Maybe it's about giving children more chances to explore freely, or just slowing down to notice what they're learning in the moment. However you interpret it, Locke's message reminds us that every child's experiences matter, and that educators have the privilege of helping write those stories each day. Locke's tabula rasa might not capture everything we know about children today, but it still challenges us to create environments where every experience matters, and every child can write their own story. Thanks for listening to our podcast on John Locke's tabula rasa theory and its influence on early childhood education today. Even though his ideas came from the 1600s, Locke's belief about the power of experience still remains relevant in classrooms today. This is seen in the ways which educators create meaningful environments, nurture curiosity, and guide children with care. We hope this podcast gave you something to reflect on about how every little thing a child learns, every experience, and every relationship shapes their story. One quote from John Locke that truly stuck out to us was, "Parents wonder why the streams are bitter when they themselves have poisoned the fountain." Thank you for listening.